Hi, my name is Dr. Jay Cardinale, and each week I teach a small group lesson based on Lifeway's Explore the Bible curriculum. So I want to encourage you to grab your copy of Scripture and learn with me from the life of Joseph on the detrimental effects of jealousy on ourselves and on our relationships. So let me ask you, if I were to name some colors, would you be able to come up with some emotions or feelings that go along with those colors? If I said blue, do you think down, depressed, sad? If I said red, do you think angry, or do you think love? If I said green, do you suddenly have flashbacks to high school English class when you studied The Great Gatsby? Maybe you think of that green light at the end of Daisy's dock across the water, and you remember that green usually goes with jealousy. Well, today we're going to talk about that green-eyed monster, jealousy. We're going to do that by looking at the life of Joseph. We've been looking at his dad, Jacob, but we're going to transition to the next generation, Joseph and his brothers. But to understand Joseph and his brothers, we have to understand something about Jacob and even something about Jacob's dad, Isaac. You see, Jacob loved Joseph more than all his other brothers and sisters. He loved him more than anybody else. And this is reminiscent of what Isaac and Rebekah did. They loved their sons differently. Isaac loved Esau. Rebekah loved Jacob. And now Jacob's continuing that unhealthy pattern by loving Joseph more than all the others. Look at Genesis chapter 37, verses 3 through 4. Now Israel loved Joseph more than his other sons because Joseph was a son born to him in his old age, and he made a long-sleeved robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him, and they would not bring themselves to speak peaceably to him. Jacob showed favoritism. Favoritism to Joseph, and all the other brothers saw this, and they got jealous. And while Jacob played a large role in the feelings that took place between the brothers and Joseph have a role to play in what's about to happen because of this jealousy. So let's dive in. Let's look at Genesis chapter 37, verses 5 through 8. Then Joseph had a dream. When he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. There we were, binding sheaves of grain in the field. Suddenly, my sheaf stood up, and your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. Are you really going to reign over us?" his brothers asked him. "Are you really going to rule us?" So they hated him even more because of his dream and what he had said. This passage shows us that believers should be wise in what they share and with whom. Now, to understand why Joseph may have messed up a little bit here, we have to understand the nature of the dream and the content of the dream. Now, this dream was clearly a prophetic pronouncement by God given to Joseph. We know that because the contents of the dream come true in Genesis chapter 42. But this was also a private communication from God to Joseph. Now, God didn't forbid Joseph from telling his brothers about the dream, but it was meant for Joseph. And prudence and wisdom might have guided Joseph not to blurt this out and tell these brothers who already didn't like him. To understand why, let's look at the content. Now, the dream is pretty straightforward. They're out gathering sheaves. Now, this would have been, they'd have gathered the wheat together, and they'd have put it together in a bundle kind of set up. You've seen those in old pictures. Well, they've each got their sheaves out there. Joseph's got his, and all the brothers have theirs. And all of a sudden, the sheaves get up and start walking around. Well, the brothers gather around Joseph's sheaves, and their sheaves bow down to him. Now, Joseph doesn't offer an interpretation of the dream, but the brothers get it. They're like, wait. You're saying that we're going to bow down to you? Really? See, Joseph wasn't very prudent and didn't practice wisdom by sharing this with his brothers, because he's saying, y'all, you're going to bow down to me. And the brothers know that since this was a dream, Joseph is saying, God told me that you're going to bow down to me. This is not very wise or prudent on Joseph's part. But I want to take a second. I want you to think for a minute. What are the advantages and disadvantages of sharing your aspirations with others? It can be exciting to share our dreams and aspirations with other people around us. Those people can encourage us, they can give us advice, they can help us out along the way. But we need to be prudent about who we share these things with. Joseph was not so. He was speaking to a hostile audience. These people already didn't like him, and he was telling them this dream. Now, believers, and just like Joseph, we shouldn't be underhanded or we shouldn't hide things that are important from people, but we need to be careful who we allow into our inner circles and tell our private dreams with. Because, think for a second, say you're a new employee. You've just come into the business. You're a young buck and you're ready to go, and you're thinking to yourself, one day I'm going to run this place, and I can see it right now. I'm going to have the corner office. It's all going to be mine one day. I've got dreams and aspirations. If you go to the veterans that have been in the office for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and you say, guys, God has told me that I'm going to take over this joint and I'm going to be the boss. These people are not going to respond very well to you. They'll probably laugh at you. They also might set you up for failure. They also might hamstring you in some ways. So you got to be careful who you let into your inner circle. And again, we don't need to be unethical and we don't need to be deceptive. We just need to be guarded sometimes about maybe some of the dreams and aspirations we have. And Joseph was not so. So Joseph goes to this hostile group and he announces this thing to them, and they hate him even more. Things are going to turn out bad in the short term for Joseph. But we know God has a plan long term to turn all this into good. But it's going to be a long road for a lot of people. So let's see what happens when these guys see Joseph next. Look at Genesis chapter 37, verse 18 through 22. They saw him in the distance, and before he had reached them, they plotted to kill him. They said to one another, "Oh, look, here comes that dream expert. So now, come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of the pits. We can say that a vicious animal ate him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." Then Reuben heard this. He tried to save him from them. He said, "Let's not take his life." Reuben also said to them, "Don't shed blood. Throw him into this pit in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him, intending to rescue him from them and return him to his father." In this passage, we can see that believers must guard against following peers bent on hurting others. Joseph's been sent by his father to find his brothers, and he's coming toward them. They already don't like him. They're already mad at him. They already are annoyed with him and don't want to be in his presence. He's a braggart, they might think. He's egotistical, they might think. And so here he comes, and they plot to kill him. Now, if you've read the Bible before, if you've read this passage before, you might just read past that. Okay, they're going to kill him, and just kind of keep trucking. But just think for a moment. They're sitting there, and one of them looks up in the distance, and he goes, "Oh, here he comes. Here comes that dream expert." And the other one goes, "Oh, man, he's got that coat on. Look at it flowing in the wind. Man, Dad didn't make us a coat." And then somebody says something else about him. Maybe somebody else says something. And before long, their individual hatred of him becomes a group idea to kill him. Now, again, think on that. They're not just going to shoot him from a long distance. He's not just going to fall dead from some poison. Somebody in that group is going to have to walk up to their brother, either stab him or hit him with a club or beat him until he's dead. Or maybe they're all just going to gang up on him, like Brutus and Julius Caesar, and they're going to kill him. They're going to have to slaughter their brother, throw him in a pit, go home and say, "Dad, a lion got him. A wolf got him. I don't know. Some ate him." This is not just your everyday when we don't like a guy. They are mad, angry, furious, can't be around him. Now, you might not find yourself in that situation where you're just ready to go out there and go after somebody like they were. But I think we can still glean a couple principles from this passage. First, we see the principle of the power of groups. While each one of these men disliked their brother individually, as they sat around together and talked about him and about the situation, they began to have a mob mentality. Groupthink was taking over. Now again, you might not find yourself in this type of exact situation, but sometimes we find ourselves in a group of people who are disgruntled and upset. Maybe it's in the workplace. Maybe it's at the school, whether you're a kid or even you're a parent at the school, or maybe it's at the church or in the community. We might find ourselves in a group where everyone's in agreement. We all have individual thoughts. We come together and we begin to use our words to talk to each other. And our words have power. And that power grows as we are all in agreement, as we are all disgruntled, as we're all upset. And that's going to lead us to unwise decisions, rash decisions. We need to be very careful in those situations. And if you find yourself in that situation and maybe you're not in agreement with what's going on and decisions that are being made, we need to speak up. And that brings us to principle number 2, the power of the individual. As the other brothers plotted to kill Joseph, Reuben speaks up. He's not in agreement with what's going on, and he speaks up. One voice in the crowd speaks up, and his plan, let's just be honest, it's not the best plan, but it's at least a plan that's going to de-escalate the situation. It's going to slow the runaway train, and that's what one voice can do. If you find yourself in a group of people, one voice can de-escalate the situation. One voice can slow the train. Now, it also can make you a target. If you speak up, people might turn on you as well. So if we're going to address an unhealthy situation, rash decisions and unwise decisions, we need to be prepared to face the consequences of having ourselves become the target. But we also need to know that, like Reuben here, he had to act. Reuben was sitting there going, they're about to kill him. I've got to do something. If we find ourselves in that situation where somebody's about to get hurt, we need to speak up. There are other times, though, when we just maybe need to say, hey, guys, I'm going to excuse myself from the conversation and step away. That's going to give you time to maybe go get some advice and get some wisdom and maybe get some help in the situation. You see, there are ways to de-escalate the situation. It only takes one voice to slow down that train. I want us, though, to think about some positive applications for this as well. These brothers were motivated by jealousy. It's all they could think about. They couldn't get it off of their minds. And so as Joseph walked up, they just let it out. What was in their mind came out, and that's all they were thinking about. It's all they were talking about. Well, when Paul concludes the book of Philippians, he takes a moment to admonish believers to guide and guard their thinking. Look at Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any moral excellence, and if there is anything praiseworthy, dwell on these things. When a group of people thinks in this way, they're less likely to let negative emotions like jealousy take over their life. When groups of people in the workplace talk like this and they think about these things, they're less likely to grumble and complain about situations. When people in the church think like this, they're more likely to advance God's kingdom. And more practically, a small group that thinks like this and does these things during Bible study time are more likely to find ways to advance God's kingdom through their small group. But also the power of the individual is present as well. Maybe you find yourselves in the middle of groups at work or church or community or school that are constantly grumbling and complaining, and their negative emotions are just constantly coming out, and they're developing a mob mentality, and they're making unwise decisions. If you find yourself in that situation, you can speak up like Reuben did. Yeah, now you could be like, y'all, stop that. That's bad, that's negative, that's horrible, don't talk like that. You could do that. But maybe, or positive way, is to think about something positive to say. Maybe somebody's complaining about something in the workplace or complaining about something a leader has done. You can say, hey guys, maybe we can meet with them and we can volunteer to help, and we can offer our suggestions on that. Maybe they'll listen to us and we can help improve the situation. Maybe if somebody's complaining or grumbling about maybe another person, and maybe it's something they've done or a life situation they're in, instead of gossiping about them or complaining about them, you can say, hey, you know what? They're in a rough spot. Maybe we can offer to help out in a certain way, or maybe we can find a way to help out their situation. Instead of just grumbling and complaining and letting negative emotions take over and groupthink happen, we can be a lone voice and we can step up and we can help out. Reuben's tried that. These brothers, they've decided, yes, we're just going to throw him in the pit. And Reuben's suggestion is going to help out for a little bit. Look at Genesis 37, 23 through 28. When Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped off Joseph's robe, the long sleeve robe that he had on. Then they took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty without water. They sat down to eat a meal. When they looked up, there was a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were carrying aromatic gum, balsam, and resin, going down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What do we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay a hand on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers agreed. When Midianite traders passed by, his brothers pulled Joseph out of the pit and sold him for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took Joseph to Egypt. Jealousy had led the brothers to a mob mentality. And that led to a cloakless Joseph laying in the bottom of a cistern, probably bruised and bloody up a bit. And then they sit down for a meal. Now, this can remind us that believers need to be careful of callousness in our lives directed toward others. So they're sitting there and having lunch, and Reuben's gone. We don't really know where Reuben went. We find out later that Reuben had left, and they're sitting there, and Joseph's in the pit, and somebody looks up and goes, "Hey, there's somebody else coming." Who's that? Oh, that's Ishmaelite traders. That's Midianite traders. They're heading down to Egypt. They've got some goods to sell. Judah pipes up. And Judah says, "Hey, instead of killing him," note that, they were still planning to kill the man. They were still planning to kill their brother. The train had slowed down a little bit. They kind of waited a minute, but Reuben's gone. The voice of reason's gone. And they're like, "Hey, we still don't like him. We still want to kill him. But instead of killing him, let's sell him. Let's sell him to the slave traders." Now, this might sound kind of like Reuben's suggestion. We're not going to kill our brother. But really, the brothers now, they're just looking for profit. They're callously looking to profit off of selling their brother. I want you to stop for a minute and consider this question. Why might a person grow calloused in his or her treatment of others? Sometimes we grow callous because people just consistently do not make the right decisions. They consistently make unwise decision after unwise decision after unwise decision, and we're just like done with that. Sometimes we get callous toward people because we personally refuse to believe and understand that other people's lived experiences is so much different than ours that we just can't understand it. Sometimes we get callous because we just get tired of suffering by helping other people. We help out financially. We help out financially. We help out financially. We give our time. We give our time. We give our time. And nothing ever seems to change. And nothing gets better. And we just get callous because it hurts us. Now, these are all negative things. We don't need to be callous toward people. Sometimes we just got to walk with people and walk with people and walk with people until finally they're able to get on their feet and able to get things going. We really need to mirror the heart of God. The psalmist gives us an idea of that. Look at Psalm 40, verses 1 and 2. "I waited patiently for the Lord," David says, "and he turned to me and heard my cry for help. He brought me up from a desolate pit, out of the muddy clay, and set my feet on a rock, making my steps secure." We should mirror the heart of God. We should reach down and help those who are in a pit. I understand that sometimes in life we have to stop, we have to pull back, and that's just circumstantial. We got to figure that out along the way. But in general, we need to help people out of the pit. But I also need to be people who don't put people in pits. You see, this lesson began with some men who were jealous. They were angry. They were mad. Their emotions got the best of them. And then they all came together, and their emotions all became one group emotion that became a mob mentality that led to someone getting hurt. We need to be very careful with our emotions this week. Be very careful with our words this week. Be very careful how we treat people this week and how we think about people this week, because our words have power. We need to be very careful that we mirror God's heart and not the jealousy or sinful thoughts that we might have in our day-to-day life. But I also want to encourage you, pray for people. You know people who are in a pit. You know people whose lives have thrown them in a pit. Their choices have thrown them in a pit. I encourage you, pray for them. Reach down and help them when you can to pull them out of the pit. But also, you might be in a pit. I want to encourage you, maybe at your wit's end, and you need somebody to come along beside you. You just don't know where to reach out to. Ask the Lord to send someone into your life. Send someone to reach down into your pit and help you this week. There's a lot going on in this story, from emotions to actions to how we treat other people. I want you to consider taking all this in this week and letting it shape the way you walk and the way you follow Jesus this week.